friends, it's Valerie. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to this week's What's for Dinner. If you are new here, welcome. I would love if you would hit that subscribe button and join my YouTube family. I put out What's for Dinner videos every Sunday, and this week I have 3 inspirational meals for you again, and I hope that you enjoy them, so let's get started. This first meal is a Crockpot cheesy buffalo chicken pasta. I'm starting off by placing 1.5 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken breast in my crock pot. Mine are frozen. You can use frozen or fresh. And then you're going to need 3 cups of chicken broth. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into my crock pot. And then I'm adding in 1/4 cup of Frank's Red Hot buffalo sauce. In total, you'll need 1/2 cup, but you're reserving 1/4 cup for later on. And you'll need some of this Hidden Valley Ranch seasoning if you have the packet, but I have the bottle. You're just going to need a tablespoon of that, and then 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of celery salt, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/8 teaspoon of pepper. And then you're going to need an 8-ounce package of cream cheese, and I'm just kind of cutting that up into some pieces so it'll help it melt a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and place those right on top. And then I went ahead and grated up some sharp cheddar cheese, and I'm going to go ahead and place 1 cup of that on top of my cream cheese. And then you're just going to go ahead and place the lid on your crock pot and cook that. I cooked mine on low for 8 hours. You can also cook it on high for 4 hours. And here is just an idea of what that looks like when it's all done. Your cream cheese is still kind of in some chunks there, but it will be okay. It'll stir in fine. And now I've just removed the chicken breasts, and I'm just going to go ahead and shred those with 2 forks. You can also use your hand mixer or your stand mixer, which I tend to do when I have more chicken breasts, but these weren't too large, so and they were completely falling apart. This was so tender. I mean, I cook chicken in the crock pot often, but it felt even more fall apart tender. I don't know if it was just the combination of like the buffalo sauce, I don't know. But anyways, so instead of just whisking up my cheese mixture, I went ahead and used my immersion blender to make that very smooth. I didn't want any like lumps or clumps of any of that cream cheese. So yeah, I just used that. You don't have to, but I went ahead and did that. And then you're going to need 16 ounces of linguine noodles, and I broke them in half, and I'm placing them in there. And I'm just using my tongs to kind of give those a stir. So I read in the comments in this recipe about how noodles can stick together in the crock pot, and I have experienced that before. So I'll tell you what I do for that in a minute. But first I'm going to go ahead and add the chicken that I shredded on top of that, and go ahead and place the lid on there, and then I'm just going to cook that on high for 1 hour. And I actually stirred this with my tongs every 15 minutes, so in total it was 4 times. It really helped to keep the noodles from sticking together. I just read this as a suggestion in comments on this recipe. I'd say if I make this again, I would definitely reduce the liquid, the chicken broth, and just cook fresh noodles and put it in. It's just a preference for me versus in the crock pot, but it still turned out just fine. I served this with a side salad. It was delicious. My boyfriend doesn't like buffalo as much as I do, so for him it was just not, it was fine, but it wasn't his favorite because he's really not big on a strong buffalo taste, and this is like the whole pasta revolves around tasting like that buffalo, but I thought it was delicious. This next meal is a white chicken chili. I actually adapted this recipe from a vegan recipe, so it was originally a vegan white chili, but I added chicken, and instead of using an oat milk, I used regular milk. But other than adding the chicken and substituting the milk, the entire rest of the recipe is vegan, if that's something you're interested in. So I started off by dicing up the equivalent of 1 medium yellow onion, and now I'm dicing up 2 poblanos, and I'm taking out the seeds, and I'm also removing some of the ribs in the poblano. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and cut those into some strips first and then dice those up. And I'm going to do the same thing with 2 jalapenos, making sure again to remove the seeds and the ribs. If you like it like hot, if you want more spice, feel free to leave that in. You know your typical preferences, so just adapt that for yourself. Now I'm taking my Dutch oven over medium heat and I'm adding in about a tablespoon of olive oil and letting that heat up, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in my onion, my poblano, and my jalapeno peppers. I'm going to quickly give that a stir to get it a little bit coated with the oil so it can start to cook down. And then I'm going to go ahead and season that with a teaspoon of pink Himalayan sea salt. And again, just give that a good stir to combine. And you're going to go ahead and cook these for 5 to 6 minutes until your veggies are softened. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in about 4 cloves of pressed garlic and then this 4-ounce can of diced green chilies, as well as 1 tablespoon of ground cumin and 1 bay leaf. I actually gave this all a stir first because when the bay leaf is dry, I just get afraid of it crumbling in there, and I had small ones, so I added 2 small bay leaves into mine. And then I'm adding in 4 cups of vegetable broth, and you're also going to need 2 14-ounce cans of cannellini beans, rinsed and drained, and as well as 28 ounces of hominy. Mine was frozen because I had it in the freezer from some leftover can that I had opened for another meal, but it was fine. It was still going to defrost fine in this broth here, so I went in and pushed it below the broth. And I'm going to go ahead and bring that to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce my heat to a medium-low and let that simmer. And now we're going to make a masa slurry by combining 2 cups of milk with some of this masa corn flour. You're going to need about a half a cup of this, and you're going to add that to your milk, whisking them together to create that slurry. Now I'm just giving my pot a quick little stir, and then I'm going to start mixing in the masa slurry slowly, a little at a time, just continuing to mix that together. You can use a whisk. I'm just using what I already had here, which was my little wooden spatula. And you're going to go ahead and let that simmer on low for another 10 to 15 minutes until it is nice and thickened. And then once it's thickened, you're going to go ahead and add in your fresh lime juice. The recipe called for 2 limes. Here you'll just see me putting 1 first. And then I added in the chicken that I'm adding to this, which was not in the original recipe. I don't even know how much. It was just like maybe 1 large chicken breast or 2 small chicken breasts that I shredded up. You can even use rotisserie chicken. And I just mixed that in, and then I tasted it just to see like what else it needed. And I was like, yes, it still needed more lime. For me, and then some salt and pepper, and then I just stirred that all together, and it was actually perfect this way. It was super delicious. We really loved this chili. It tasted amazing. I cut up some toppings like avocado, cilantro, jalapenos. You can use pickled jalapenos. I served this with some tortilla chips, and we loved this. It made amazing leftovers. Like, all the flavors really melded together as leftovers, and it was just such a great like comfort food for a nice cold day. Very tasty and hearty. This last meal is going to be a cheesy cabbage Creole. I am going to start off by dicing up the equivalent of 1 small yellow onion And I'm also going to be dicing up one small green bell pepper and one small red bell pepper. I actually had a very large bell pepper, so you'll see me kind of only using half of it to get the equivalent of a small bell pepper. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and remove those seeds and dice that all up. Next, you're going to need about one small head of cabbage, and then you're just going to take your knife and like finely shred it. Basically, you want some nice thin slices. Yeah, so just go ahead and do that, and you'll see that I am actually leaving out or taking out any of those larger, really white veins of the cabbage or larger white chunks of the cabbage. That's just never my favorite part of the cabbage, so I am making sure to remove a majority of that. Your preference, of course, if you want to leave it in. I just find that it never tastes as good as the other parts of the cabbage, and it still worked out to have enough for the dish. And now I'm taking 1 pound of lean ground turkey, and I'm just going to place that in my skillet over medium-high heat. And I'm using my meat chopping tool to just go ahead and break that apart. And now the recipe doesn't call for this, but I need to season my meat with some seasoning. So I'm using some garlic powder, some onion powder, a little bit of Italian seasoning. I gave that all like a mixture into the meat, as well as still breaking up my meat so it can continue to brown. And then I realized like I was thinking about what else would taste good in this, so I was like, oh, some seasoning salt I feel like would be good in this, so I added a little bit of seasoning salt as well and stirred that in. I should also note that the recipe actually calls for ground beef, but I substituted for ground turkey, and it was just as fine to me to keep it on a leaner side. And now, once my ground turkey is browned, I'm adding in those bell peppers and onions, as well as around a tablespoon of minced garlic. And I'm just going to go ahead and toss that all together to combine it. And we're going to go ahead and let that begin to start to cook down, like all those peppers, and get nice and softened. And you're going to season it with some Creole seasoning. So, okay, so the original recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of Creole seasoning and 1.5 teaspoons of black pepper, and so I went ahead and did that. But let me tell you, this was super spicy for us. So if you don't like very much spice, you should definitely cut that down to 1 teaspoon or whatever you're used to having. If you use Creole seasoning, normally use whatever you're used to, but it was really spicy with 2, so just be wary of that. Now I'm adding in my shredded up cabbage, as well as 1 can of rotel, and then 8 ounces of Velveeta cheese cubed up, and I'm kind of just folding it over so that I can get the parts of the cabbage that are starting to cook on the bottom there, and make sure that all your cabbage starts to get softened. And it will continue to cook down. Just let that begin, like, stay simmering, and your cheese will get nice and bubbly and melty. I was going to make white rice and serve it over it, but I actually had these packets of rice that I needed to use up for my pantry, so I am using the white rice. My boyfriend is using like a flavored rice to put this over. I really love cabbage a lot, so I enjoyed this recipe a lot. I just need to cut back on that spice level for our preference, but it was really, really good. And it was really good served over white rice. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little bell so you don't miss out on any future What's for Dinner videos, and I hope you all have an amazing week.